I walked into the kitchen of my son-in-law's restaurant and froze. My daughter was devouring leftovers from dirty plates, hidden in a dark corner. When he saw me, he flashed a cruel smile and said, "That is her place now." In that moment, something inside me woke up. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed the number I swore I would never use again. The time had come to collect that debt. But before we continue, check if you are already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching us from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. My name is Susan. I am 62 years old, and I have spent the last 4 decades of my life trying to be invisible. I was not always like this. There was a time when my name meant something in this city, a time when people respected me, even feared me. But that was before making the choice that would change everything, before sacrificing my career to save someone who did not deserve it. It was a random Thursday when I decided to visit my daughter, Emily, at work. She was 32 years old and had always been my dreamer, the girl who believed in the best in people, even when all the signs pointed to the contrary. 3 months prior, she had left her stable job as a literature teacher to work at the restaurant of her husband, Brad. He convinced her with golden promises, telling her she would be the manager, that she would be the queen of the place. I never trusted him. From the first day Emily brought him home 5 years ago, something in his eyes made me uncomfortable. It was a calculating glint, the look of someone who measures the value of people by what he can extract from them. But Emily was in love, blind to the signs I saw so clearly, and I, tired of so many battles in life, let her follow her path. The restaurant was called The Golden Spoon. What a pretentious name for what was actually just another mediocre establishment on a busy corner in downtown Chicago. I arrived around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the time when lunch was over and dinner had not yet begun. The facade had cheap neon lights that flickered irregularly, and the paint was peeling around the edges of the windows. I walked in through the front door. The smell that greeted me was horrible, a mix of stale oil, cheap perfume, and something sour that smelled like mold. The tables were dirty, with food scraps still stuck to the plastic tablecloths. A waitress in a uniform that was too tight was chewing gum while checking her cell phone. She did not even look at me when I entered. "I came to see Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the knot in my chest I was already starting to feel. The girl let out a sarcastic little laugh. "The manager? Sure. Look in the back, where managers usually are." The mocking tone was unmistakable. I walked down the narrow hallway that led to the kitchen. The walls were stained, with splashes of sauce and grease that no one bothered to clean. The noise coming from the kitchen was chaotic. Pans banging, shouting, the constant whistle of the exhaust fan that clearly was not working right. I pushed the double doors and entered. The heat hit me like a solid wall. The kitchen was a disaster. Cooks in dirty uniforms moved without coordination, dropping utensils on the filthy floor. Vegetable peels piled up in the corners. The smell of burnt food mixed with cheap cleaning products was suffocating. I looked for Emily, expecting to see her in an office, reviewing orders, managing the team. But she was not in any visible place. I kept looking, and that was when my heart stopped. In the darkest and most distant corner of the kitchen, near the dishwashing area, was a hunched figure. It took me a few seconds to process what I was seeing. It was Emily. My daughter was wearing a dirty apron that had once been white but was now gray from so much accumulated grime. Her hair, always so well kept, was messy and tied in a crooked bun. But the worst part was not where she was. It was what she was doing. Emily held a plate in her hands that had clearly come back from the dining room, half a cold and messy lasagna, touched by the forks of unknown customers. And she was eating. Not slowly. Not with dignity. She was devouring those leftovers with a desperate urgency, as if she had not eaten in days. Her hands shook as she brought the food to her mouth, and tears rolled silently down her face. I felt my legs go weak. The world around me began to spin. My mouth went dry. My heart beat so loud I could hear it in my ears. That was my daughter, the girl I raised with so much love, eating leftovers like a starving animal in a dark corner of a filthy kitchen. I took a step forward, but before I could reach her, I heard a voice that made me stop. "Delicious, right?" Brad entered the kitchen as if he were stepping onto a stage. He wore an expensive suit that contrasted absurdly with the filth around him. His hair was perfectly slicked back with gel, and he smiled with that smile that always gave me the chills. The cooks fell silent when he passed. Emily dropped the plate immediately. The metallic sound resonated through the kitchen. She tried to shrink away, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. Brad walked toward her with slow and deliberate steps, savoring every moment. She was hungry, he announced loudly, turning to the cooks as if telling a joke. But here, at the Golden Spoon, you work for your food. And since our dear manager, he paused sarcastically on the word, mixed up 3 orders today at lunch and caused losses, she eats what the customers leave. He got closer to Emily, who was now crying openly, covering her face with sauce-stained hands. Brad continued, his voice becoming increasingly cruel. An incompetent person does not deserve a real job, much less fresh food. She should be grateful I have pity on her and let her stay here. It was at that moment that he saw me. Brad turned, and our eyes met. For a split second, I saw something pass across his face, perhaps surprise, perhaps fear, but then that smile returned, even more arrogant. Susan, he said my name as if it were poison. What an honor. Did you come to see how your daughter is doing in my establishment? I did not answer. I could not. All the words that normally would have come out of my mouth got stuck in my throat. I walked toward Emily in silence. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes, full of shame. She tried to say something, but just sobbed. I held her elbow firmly, but gently. I felt how thin she was, the bones prominent under her skin. How many pounds had she lost? How long had this been happening? Let's go, I told her quietly, just for her. Oh, you are leaving? Brad let out a loud laugh. Great! One less useless mouth to feed. And do not come back, Emily. You are fired. Fired from my life, too. You can go look for another fool to support you. He pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket pocket and threw it on the floor at Emily's feet. Some bills fell out, a ridiculous amount that would not even cover a week of basic expenses. Take your crumbs and get out. I am filing for divorce. I guided Emily out of that hellish kitchen. She was trembling so much she could barely walk. We passed down the hallway, past the waitress who was now watching us with morbid curiosity, and went out to the street. The fresh air had never been so welcome, but it could not erase what I had just witnessed. I put Emily in the back seat of a taxi. She curled up in the corner, hugging her knees like a child. I sat beside her, and for the first time in 20 years, I took out my cell phone and dialed a number I had sworn never to use again. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. My hand was shaking. Emily looked at me without understanding, but I could not explain it yet. Finally, someone answered. Hello? The voice was deep, cautious. Michael, I said, and it was as if 20 years of silence collapsed between us. It is me, Susan. There was a long pause. I heard his heavy breathing on the other end of the line. Susan, he said finally. And there was so much weight in that single word. After so long. Is it the police? No, I replied, looking at my destroyed daughter beside me. It is time for you to pay your debt to me. I hung up before he could respond. I put the phone away and hugged Emily, who finally collapsed into violent sobs against my shoulder. The taxi continued in silence through the city while I looked out the window, feeling something I had not felt for decades awaken inside me. It was not rage. Rage is hot, explosive, uncontrolled. What I felt was cold, calculated, precise. It was the feeling of someone about to use a sharp knife to make a surgical cut. Brad had no idea what he had just unleashed. I took Emily directly to my house in a quiet suburb just outside the city. She did not protest, did not ask questions. She was in a state of shock, moving like a robot. I helped her take off that filthy apron, ran a hot bath, and laid clean clothes on the bed. While she was in the shower, I went to the kitchen and prepared a simple vegetable soup, something nutritious but light that her likely mistreated stomach could digest. When Emily came out of the bathroom, wearing my old robe and with her hair still wet, she looked 10 years older. She sat at the table without saying anything and began to eat the soup slowly. I sat across from her, watching her in silence. Since when? I asked finally. Emily stopped with the spoon in the air. Her hands began to tremble again. 2 months, she whispered. At first, he really let me help with the management, but then he started saying I was doing everything wrong, that I was too stupid, too slow. He kept diminishing my responsibilities until I became just another employee. Then, not even that. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you tell me? Tears filled her eyes again. Because I was ashamed. You never liked him, and I wanted so much to prove you were wrong, that he loved me, that we could build something together. I spent all my savings to help open the restaurant. I thought it was our partnership, our future. She dropped the spoon and covered her face with her hands. He turned me into a joke, Mom. The other employees laugh at me. He makes me wash dishes, scrub toilets, and when I make any mistake, he takes away my food as punishment. Today I was so hungry. My heart broke and hardened at the same time. I stood up, walked around the table, and hugged my daughter. She was so fragile now, so different from the self-assured young woman she had been. Listen well, I said, holding her face between my hands. This is over. You will never go back to that place. You will never see that man again, and he is going to pay for every humiliation he put you through. Mom, he is powerful. He has contacts, influential friends. We can't do anything against him. I smiled, and it was a smile I had not used in a long time. My dear, you do not know who your mother really is, or rather, who she was. Emily looked at me confused, but I did not explain yet. There were things she needed to know, but it was not the time. First, I needed to make sure she was safe, fed, rested. Then, the revenge would come. That night, after Emily finally fell asleep in my room, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea and called Michael again. This time, he answered on the first ring. What do you need? His voice was direct, no small talk. Information. I want to know everything about Brad Miller. Finances, legal issues, personal affairs. Every skeleton he has in the closet, that is going to take time. You have until tomorrow afternoon. There was a pause. Susan, you know I owe you everything. That night you took the blame for me. You lost everything. Your career, your reputation. I spent 20 years living with that debt, and now it is time to pay it, I said firmly. My daughter was destroyed by this man. He is going to lose everything, just like I lost. But unlike me, he deserves it. Understood. I am putting my team on it right now. Michael was no longer the scared 25-year-old boy who almost went to prison for embezzlement from the company where we worked. Now he was one of the most powerful businessmen in the city, with connections in every sphere. And he owed me. He owed me a lot. 24 years ago, I was the financial manager of a large import company. Michael was my assistant. Young, ambitious, but reckless. He got involved in illegal gambling, and desperate for money, he diverted funds from the company. When the audit discovered it, he was hours away from being arrested. Back then, my younger brother had just started college at Ohio State. My mother was sick. I was the family's support. But I looked at Michael, saw the panic in his eyes, saw his whole life about to crumble, and I made a decision that would change everything. I took the blame. I said it had been my negligence, that the financial controls failed under my supervision. I lost my job, my professional certification, my reputation. I had to start from zero, accepting menial jobs just to survive. Michael built an empire with the time I gave him. And now, finally, that debt would be collected. The next morning, Emily woke up late. I made a hearty breakfast and insisted she eat everything. She was still pale, but there was a little more color in her face. While we were eating, my phone rang. I have everything, Michael said without preamble. Can I come to your house? Come. An hour later, Michael was sitting in my living room. He was 49 years old now, silver hair, impeccable suit. When he saw Emily, his face softened. You must be Emily. I have heard a lot about you over the years. Emily looked at me, confused. Who is he, Mom? Someone who owes me a very big favor, I said simply. Michael opened his briefcase and spread documents on the coffee table. Brad Miller, he began. 34 years old, married to Emily for 4 years, owner of the Golden Spoon restaurant for 7 months, and he is a complete financial disaster. He pointed to spreadsheets and bank statements. The restaurant is bleeding money, unpaid suppliers, late wages, debts to loan sharks. But here is the interesting part. He pulled out another set of documents. He is diverting what little money comes in to a new project. What project? I asked, leaning forward. A new restaurant, more luxurious, downtown. He already rented the space, is already remodeling. And he is not doing it alone. Michael put a photo on the table. It was Brad, with a tall, blonde woman, dressed in expensive clothes. They were hugging, laughing. Tiffany Stone, 28 years old, model, digital influencer, and your son-in-law's new business partner, or rather, new girlfriend that he is using his wife's money to impress. Emily took the photo with trembling hands, her eyes filled with tears. But this time, there was something different in them. It was not just pain, it was rage. He used my money for this? Her voice was low, controlled. All the money I saved tutoring at night, savings that took me years to gather? Every penny, confirmed Michael. And there is more. The lease for the Golden Spoon is in your name, Emily. If the restaurant closes or has legal problems, you are responsible for the debts. Is that possible? Emily looked at me horrified. Perfectly possible when you trust the wrong person, I said bitterly. Michael continued. But here is where it gets interesting. The new restaurant is being registered only in Tiffany's name. Brad is planning to let the Golden Spoon go bankrupt, leave all the debts to Emily, and start fresh with the mistress. The silence that followed was heavy. Emily looked at the documents as if she could not believe what she was seeing. The full extent of Brad's betrayal was there, in black and white. He planned it from the beginning, she said finally. From the start, he just wanted to use me. Yes, I confirmed. But now we are going to use his weapons against him. Emily raised her eyes to me. How? I turned to Michael. Did you say he has debts with loan sharks? Yes. A man named Vinny, known on the streets as the Wolf. Not someone you want to mess with. How much does Brad owe? $400,000. With accumulated interest, it is already over $500,000. I nodded slowly, a plan forming in my mind. Michael, can you buy that debt? He blinked, surprised. Buy the debt? Susan, it is $500,000. You owe me 24 years of my life. Can you or can you not? Michael remained silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. I can. But what do you intend to do? When you buy the debt, you will have rights over all of Brad's assets in case he does not pay, correct? Yes, including participation in any business he has. Then we will do the following, I said, feeling that old strategic cunning wake up after so many years dormant. Buy the debt, but do not tell Brad. Let him think he still owes the Wolf. Meanwhile, let's make sure the Golden Spoon has some problems. What kind of problems? Emily asked. And for the first time since I rescued her from that hell, I saw a flash of the fighting spirit she used to have. The kind that shuts down restaurants, I replied. Health code violations, expired licenses, labor complaints. Michael, do you have contacts in those departments? I have contacts everywhere that matters. Perfect. Then tomorrow morning, I want the worst inspectors you know to show up at the Golden Spoon. The ones who find problems even in a spotless kitchen. Michael sketched a slow smile. That can be arranged. And there is one more thing, I continued. Emily, do you still have the keys to the restaurant? Yes, I do. Perfect. Tonight we will pay a little visit to Brad's office. We waited until midnight. Emily took me to the back of the Golden Spoon, where a side door gave access to the administrative offices. The restaurant was closed and dark, only a few security lights blinking weakly. Emily trembled when she put the key in the lock. Everything is fine, I whispered. He is not here. And even if he were, I would not let anything happen to you. We entered in silence. The place smelled worse at night, when the air conditioning was not running, and all the odors stayed concentrated. Emily guided me down the hall to a small room Brad called an office. It was more of a closet than a real office, crammed with boxes, papers, and trash. He keeps everything in a safe, Emily explained, pointing to a small safe embedded in the wall behind a shelf. I know the combination. It was our wedding anniversary. Her voice was loaded with bitterness. Open it. Emily dialed the numbers, and the safe opened with a click. Inside were documents, some cash, and a laptop. I took everything and put it in a backpack I had brought. He is going to notice, Emily said nervously. He will notice. But when he does, it will already be too late. I also checked the desk drawers and found some interesting receipts. Purchases of expensive furniture, interior design contracts, all for the new restaurant Brad was setting up with Tiffany. Absurd amounts, far beyond what the Golden Spoon could generate. Look at this, I showed Emily. While you were eating leftovers, he was spending thousands on crystal chandeliers to impress his mistress. Emily's face hardened. I want him to pay, Mom. I want him to feel every ounce of pain he made me feel. He will feel it, I promised. He will feel much more than that. We left the restaurant as silently as we entered. Back home, I spent the rest of the night examining the documents. Brad's laptop was a treasure trove of incriminating information. Parallel accounting, fake invoices, undeclared payments. It was enough material to destroy him completely. The next morning, Michael called early. The inspectors are already on their way. They should arrive at the restaurant around 10. Perfect. I will be there to see it. Susan. Michael hesitated. Are you sure about this? Once we start, there is no turning back. I have never been so sure of anything in my life. At 9:45, I dressed in simple but neat clothes and took a taxi to the Golden Spoon. I stayed across the street, watching from a coffee shop. At 10 o'clock sharp, a white van from the health department pulled up in front of the restaurant. 2 inspectors got out, carrying clipboards and equipment. They were known in the industry as the most rigorous and inflexible in the city. I saw Brad run out to meet them, panic already stamped on his face. The inspectors did not even look at him. They simply entered the establishment. 40 minutes later, they came out. One of them slapped a huge orange notice on the door. Closed for health violations. Prohibited from operating for 30 days. Brad was outside, gesturing frantically, trying to negotiate. But the inspectors were already getting into the van. My cell phone rang. It was Michael. Phase 1 complete. And I have more news. I just received the transfer of ownership of Brad's debt. Officially, I am the creditor now. Excellent. Phase 2. Notify Brad that the debt has matured and that he has 48 hours to pay, or you are going to seize all his assets, including the share in the new restaurant? Especially the share in the new restaurant. I hung up and kept watching. Brad was on the phone now, clearly desperate, probably calling suppliers, trying to cancel orders, trying to save what he could. But it was too late. The gears I had set in motion were relentless. I returned home, where Emily was waiting anxiously. Did it go well? Perfectly. The restaurant is closed for a month, and Michael just became the owner of Brad's debt. Emily sat down heavily. I cannot believe it is really happening. For so long I felt so powerless. I know, dear, but now you are seeing what happens when someone messes with the wrong person. I paused. Emily, I never told you much about my past, about who I was before you were born. You always said I was a financial manager and lost my job. It was more than that. I was considered the best financial strategist in the region. I could see patterns where others saw chaos. I could destroy a competitor company with a few calculated moves or save a business on the brink of bankruptcy. I was feared and respected. I stopped speaking and looked out the window. But then I took the blame for someone else's mistake, and I lost everything. I spent the last 24 years living in the shadows, working simple jobs, raising you alone after your father abandoned us. I buried that part of me so deep I almost forgot it existed. I turned to Emily. But seeing you in that corner, eating leftovers like a dog while that worm laughed, something inside me woke up, and I realized that I still know exactly how to destroy someone. Emily looked at me with a mix of admiration and wariness. What is going to happen now? Now? Now Brad will receive the debt collection notice and go into total panic. It did not take long. At 4 p.m. that same day, my cell phone rang. It was Emily, voice frightened. Mom? Brad is banging on the door. He is screaming. Stay in the room. Lock the door. I will handle it. I went downstairs. Brad was outside, red with rage, pounding on the door. When I opened it, he practically invaded the house. Where is she? He screamed. Where is that treacherous daughter of yours? Lower your voice, I said calmly. Or I call the police. Call them. I don't care. My restaurant was closed because of her. I am sure of it. And now I receive a notice saying my debt was sold and I have 48 hours to pay $500,000 or I lose everything. What a pity, I said without emotion. Maybe you should have thought about that before humiliating my daughter. Brad took a threatening step in my direction. It was you. You set all this up, you old witch. Me? I am just a retiree. But it seems your bad decisions finally caught up with you. I am going to destroy both of you. I am going to make you pay. No, you won't, I said with absolute certainty. Because in 48 hours, you will have nothing to use against anyone. Now get out of my house before I actually call the police. And Brad? I leaned closer. If you come near my daughter again, what has happened so far will look like child's play. He looked at me with pure hate. But he saw something in my eyes that made him back down. He left, slamming the door. I went back upstairs, where Emily was hiding, pale and shaking. Everything is fine, I said. He cannot hurt you anymore. But that night, when Emily finally slept, I received a call from Michael. His voice was tense. Susan, we have a problem. Brad found an investor, someone willing to pay the debt for him in exchange for a share in the new restaurant. My stomach sank. Who? I do not know yet. But if he manages to pay the debt before the deadline, we lose our leverage. No, I said firmly. We are not going to lose. Find out who that investor is and how much time we have. I hung up and sat in the darkness of the living room, thinking quickly. Brad was smarter than I had calculated, but I had not survived 24 years of hardship to be defeated now. If he wanted to play dirty, I would show him what it really was to fight without rules. The next morning brought answers I did not expect. Michael appeared at my house at 7 o'clock sharp, looking like he had not slept. He entered quickly, looking nervously over his shoulder as if he were being followed. I found out who the investor is, he said as soon as we sat down. And you aren't going to like it. Who? Arthur Sterling. The name hit me like a punch in the stomach. Arthur Sterling, my former boss at the import company, the man who had fired me 24 years ago, the man who never believed my version of events and spent years telling anyone who would listen that I was corrupt and incompetent. Sterling, I repeated, feeling an ancient rage resurface. Of course it is him. That man always had a special talent for backing the wrong people. There is more, Michael continued. He is not doing it just for money. He knows you are involved. Brad went to see him last night, desperate, and mentioned your name. Sterling saw an opportunity to strike you again, to prove he was right about you all along. How did he find out I am involved? Brad is not completely an idiot. He connected the dots, the timing of the closure, the sudden purchase of the debt, everything happening right after you showed up at the restaurant. And when he mentioned your name to Sterling, the old man became obsessed. I stood up and began to pace the living room. My mind was racing, calculating possibilities, weighing options. Sterling had resources, he had influence. If he really decided to help Brad, it could complicate everything. How much is Sterling willing to invest? I asked. Enough to cover the debt and still finance the opening of the new restaurant. He views it as a double investment, money and revenge. Emily appeared in the doorway, still in pajamas. Mom? What is happening? I looked at my daughter, then at Michael. Change of plans. If Sterling wants to enter this game, let's let him. But he does not know who he is dealing with. I spent the rest of the morning on the phone, activating contacts I had not used for years. Most were surprised to hear my voice. Some hung up on me, but others, those who remembered who I really was, listened. I called Stephen Grant, a tax attorney I had helped avoid bankruptcy years ago when he was starting his career. Now he was one of the most respected tax lawyers in the city. Susan, he said when he answered, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I thought you had retired for good. I thought so too. But it seems the universe had other plans. Stephen, I need a favor. After what you did for me, you can ask for whatever you want. I need a complete audit on Arthur Sterling's businesses, especially recent investments, and I need it fast. There was a pause. Sterling? Susan, that man has expensive lawyers and political influence. I know. That is exactly why I am calling you. If anyone can find legal irregularities, it is you. Give me 24 hours. I also called Sarah, an investigative journalist who had exposed several corporate scandals. Years ago, when she was an intern, I had given her inside information about fraud at a competitor company, information that launched her career. "Susan," she answered excitedly. "How long has it been? I heard you had disappeared. I was just waiting for the right moment to return." "Sarah, are you still interested in exposing powerful men who abuse their positions?" "Always." "What do you have?" "Potentially, a story about questionable investments and labor exploitation. But I need time to gather all the evidence. I have a flexible editorial deadline. How much time do you need?" "A week, maybe 2. "You got it. But Susan, whatever you are planning, be careful. The men you are confronting will not like being exposed." "I know. That is exactly why I am doing it." Emily watched me with a mix of admiration and concern. "Mom, this is getting very big. First, it was just Brad. Now this Sterling is involved." "Honey," I said, holding her hands, "people like Brad and Sterling only have power because no one confronts them. They count on fear, on the silence of victims. But I have nothing left to lose, and you deserve justice." That afternoon, Michael returned with news. "Sterling signed the contract with Brad this morning. He is paying the full debt and becoming the majority partner of the new restaurant. The grand opening is scheduled for 3 weeks from now." "Perfect," I said, surprising both Michael and Emily. "Let them celebrate. Let them think they won." "Susan, I don't understand. We lost leverage over Brad." "We lost nothing. We just changed the target." I opened my laptop and showed them the documents I had found in Brad's safe. "Look at this. Parallel accounting, fake invoices. Brad was evading taxes for months, and now Sterling has just become a partner in a fraudulent business." Michael's eyes went wide. "If we prove Sterling knew this, he goes down, along with Brad. And even if he didn't know, as the majority partner, he is legally responsible." Emily was starting to understand. "You are going to destroy both of them at once." "Exactly. But I need more ammunition." "Michael, do you have access to Sterling's banking records?" "Technically no, but I know someone who does." "Make it happen. And I need to know everything about the new restaurant. Suppliers, contracts, licenses, everything." In the following 3 days, I worked more than I had worked in years. Michael provided me with detailed information on Sterling's finances. Stephen discovered several questionable transactions, including payments to local politicians that could constitute bribery. Sarah began preparing the report, discreetly interviewing former employees of Sterling's companies. And I, sitting in my small house in the suburbs with Emily by my side, put together a puzzle that would show the full extent of the corruption and cruelty of those men. One night, while we worked late, Emily asked me a question I knew would come. "Mom, why did you do that? Why did you take the blame for Michael's mistake years ago?" I sighed and leaned back in the chair, because at that moment it seemed like the right thing to do. Michael was young. He had his whole life ahead of him. I thought I could rebuild my career. I didn't realize how difficult it would be, how much the stain on my reputation would haunt me. "Do you regret it?" I thought carefully before answering. "I regret having lost so much, having struggled so much. But I do not regret giving Michael a second chance. What I regret is letting that define me, becoming invisible, stopping the fight." I looked at her, but seeing you in that restaurant made me remember who I was, and made me realize that I still can fight. Emily hugged me tight. "Thank you for fighting for me. Always, my daughter. Always." On the 5th day, Stephen called. "Susan, I found something big. Sterling is involved in a money laundering scheme through Shell Restaurants. The new restaurant he is financing is perfect for the pattern. High investment, documented but inflated return, clean money coming out the other side. Do you have proof? Enough to interest the district attorney. But Susan, if I report this, there will be a full investigation. Brad and Sterling will be arrested, but Emily will also be investigated, since technically she is still Brad's wife." I looked at Emily, who was watching me anxiously. She had lost so much, suffered so much. The last thing I wanted was to get her into more trouble. "Is there any way to protect Emily?" I asked. "If she cooperates voluntarily with the investigation, reports what she knows, she can receive immunity. But it means exposing everything publicly. It means everyone will know she was cheated, humiliated." Emily took the phone from my hand. "Stephen, It is Emily. I will do it. I will report everything. I do not care if people know. I want the truth to come out. Her voice was steady, without hesitation. In that moment, I saw that my daughter was no longer the scared victim I had rescued weeks ago. She was a survivor, a fighter. Are you sure, Emily? Stephen asked. Once we start, there is no turning back. Absolutely sure. When do we start? Tomorrow morning. Come to my office at 9. I will have a prosecutor waiting for you. We hung up, and Emily looked at me with determination in her eyes. It is time to end this, Mom. Yes, I agreed. It is time. But there was still one piece of the puzzle I needed to put in place. A piece that was going to make Brad and Sterling's fall even more spectacular. And for that, I would need to do something I hadn't done in a long time. I would need to go back to being the woman I was before everything fell apart. The ruthless strategist, the woman who was afraid of nothing. The next morning, Emily and I arrived at Stephen's office exactly at 9. The place was impressive. A whole floor of a commercial building downtown, with a view of the Chicago skyline. The rooms had glass walls, modern furniture, and dozens of lawyers working at their computers. Stephen met us personally and took us to a private conference room. Inside, a man of about 50 was waiting for us. He wore a dark suit and had the rigid posture of someone who spends their life chasing criminals. This is District Attorney Miller, Stephen introduced us. Mr. Miller, these are Susan and Emily. The prosecutor greeted us formally and indicated the chairs. Mrs. Susan. Stephen gave me some preliminary information about the case, but I need to hear it from you directly. Emily, are you willing to testify against your husband? Yes, answered Emily without hesitating. Against him and against anyone involved. For the next 3 hours, Emily told everything. Every humiliation, every moment of abuse, every penny Brad had stolen from her. She showed the bank transfers from her savings to the restaurant accounts. She showed text messages where Brad insulted and threatened her. She described the degrading working conditions. I supplemented with the documents I had found. The parallel accounting, the fake invoices, the undeclared payments. And then I delivered the bomb, the financial transactions of Sterling that Stephen had discovered, showing the pattern of money laundering. District Attorney Miller listened in silence, occasionally making notes. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and remained silent for a long moment. This is enough, he said finally. It is enough for search and seizure warrants, for freezing accounts, possibly for pretrial detention. But I need to be honest with you. A case like this can take months, even years. And men like Sterling have resources to prolong processes indefinitely. I understand, I said. But we have something that can speed things up. I took out my cell phone and showed the photos I had taken of Brad with Tiffany. The grand opening of the new restaurant is scheduled for 2 weeks from now. It will be a big event, with press, local authorities, if we make the warrants be executed during the opening. District Attorney Miller smiled for the first time. That would be quite spectacular and effective. The more public, the harder for them to try to sweep everything under the rug. Exactly what I was thinking. Very well. I will request the warrants today. They should be approved in a week. Then it is just a matter of timing. We left the office with a mix of relief and anticipation. Emily was lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. It is really going to happen, she said as we walked down the street. He is going to pay. Yes, but Emily, do you understand that in the coming weeks your life will be exposed? The media will cover the case. Your name will be in the papers. I know. And that is fine. I do not have shame anymore. I was the victim, not the criminal. That new strength in my daughter filled me with pride. She had survived the worst and emerged stronger. But there was still one last thing I needed to do before the opening. That afternoon, I went alone to Brad and Sterling's new restaurant. It was called the North Star, a pretentious name for an establishment being built on fraud and dirty money. The facade was almost ready. Italian marble, mirrored glass, an elegant neon sign. I stood across the street watching the workers come and go. I saw Brad appear, now wearing even more expensive clothes, driving a new car. Tiffany was with him, clinging to his arm, laughing at something he said. They looked like a successful couple, without a care in the world. If only they knew what was coming. My cell phone rang. It was Sarah, the journalist. "Susan, I finished the preliminary report. I want to show it to you before publishing. Can you come to the newspaper?" "I can. I will be there in 20 minutes." In Sarah's office, I read the report she had prepared. It was devastating. She had interviewed 5 former employees of Sterling's companies, all with similar stories of abuse, exploitation, and illegal practices. She had interviewed former employees of the Golden Spoon, who confirmed the terrible conditions and degrading treatment Brad gave the staff. The report connected everything. It showed how Sterling used his restaurants to launder money, how Brad was a perfect partner for that scheme, and how Emily had been used and discarded in the process. "This is going to cause an earthquake," I said. "That is the intention. When do you want me to publish?" "The day of the opening. But not in the morning. Publish at 7 in the evening, 1 hour after the official opening, when there are already a lot of people there, when social media is already full of photos of the event." Sarah smiled mischievously. "You are diabolical, Susan. I like that." The following days passed at a strange speed. District Attorney Miller kept us informed about the progress of the warrants. Everything was being approved. Search and seizure at Brad and Sterling's restaurants, freezing of bank accounts, temporary arrest warrants for investigation. Emily spent that time recovering. She gained weight, the color returned to her face, and the sparkle returned to her eyes. She began to make plans for the future. She talked about going back to teaching, maybe opening her own academy. "When all this is over," she told me one night, "I want to do something meaningful. I want to help other women who went through what I went through, show that it is possible to survive and rebuild." "You will be amazing at that," I said, hugging her. Michael was also present during that period, providing logistical and emotional support. One night, after Emily went to sleep, he and I talked in the kitchen. "Susan, I could never thank you properly for what you did for me all those years ago," he said. "I built an empire on the sacrifice you made, and I spent every day of the last 24 years waiting for a chance to pay it back. You are paying it back now. I know, but it is not enough. When all this is over, I want you to come back. Not to work for me, but with me. I need someone with your strategic mind, your experience. I can offer you a partnership, profit sharing." I looked at him, surprised. "Michael, I am 62 years old. So what? Your mind is sharper than ever. You orchestrated all this." He gestured around, referring to the complex plan we had set up. "In 2 weeks, you will have taken down 2 powerful men. Imagine what you could do in a position of real power." "I will think about it," I said. But deep down, I already knew my answer. Finally, the day of the opening arrived. Emily and I spent the morning preparing our clothes. I chose an elegant but understated dress, black and simple. Emily wore a navy blue dress that made her look professional and confident. "Ready?" I asked her at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. "More than ready. Let's finish this." We arrived at the North Star at 6 o'clock sharp. The event was already in full swing. Expensive cars filled the parking lot. Photographers captured guests at the entrance. Soft music played from discreet speakers. It was all very elegant, very refined. Brad and Sterling were near the entrance, greeting guests like proud hosts. Brad was radiant, wearing an expensive tuxedo. Sterling, beside him, looked like a statesman, shaking hands with important people, making promises, closing deals. Tiffany circulated among the guests with a glass of champagne, her designer dress drawing attention. She laughed too loudly, touched people too familiarly, clearly reveling in her new position of power. None of them saw us enter. We stood at the back of the room, watching, waiting. Emily was tense beside me, her fingers squeezing my hand. At 6:30, District Attorney Miller sent me a message. "Teams in position, waiting for your signal." At 7 o'clock sharp, when the event was at its peak, when all the important guests had already arrived, when the cameras were all positioned for Sterling's opening speech, I sent a single word: "Now." 3 minutes later, the restaurant doors burst open. FBI agents entered in formation, followed by prosecutors and marshals. The room fell into absolute silence. The music stopped. "Brad Miller, Arthur Sterling," one of the agents said loudly. "You are under arrest for tax fraud, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." Chaos exploded. Guests screamed. They ran toward the exits. Photographers, realizing they had a much bigger story on their hands, began photographing frantically. Brad tried to run, but was immobilized by 2 agents. Sterling, smarter, stood still, but his face was white as paper. Tiffany let out a sharp scream and dropped her glass of champagne, which shattered on the marble floor. It was then that Emily took a step forward, stepping out of the shadows. Brad saw her, and his eyes went wide with shock and understanding. "You," he whispered. "You did this." "No," Emily said clearly, her voice steady. "You did this to yourself. I just told the truth." At the same moment, I saw Sarah publish the report online. Notifications began to ping on guests' cell phones. People began to read, their faces reflecting horror, disgust, fascination. The story was spreading like fire. In minutes, it would be the headline on all major news portals. By the end of the night, Brad and Sterling would be the most hated men in the city. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs, their heads bowed, their arrogance completely destroyed. I watched the empire they had built on lies and cruelty crumble in a matter of minutes. And I felt, for the first time in 24 years, that justice had been done. The days following the arrest of Brad and Sterling were a whirlwind. The story dominated every newscast, every TV channel, every newspaper, every news site talked about the scandal. "Luxury restaurant hides money laundering scheme" was the most common headline. Photos of Brad being led away in handcuffs went viral on social media. Sarah's report was reposted dozens of times, cited on TV shows, shared millions of times. She had become one of the most sought-after journalists of the moment, giving interviews on corporate corruption investigation. And always she mentioned Emily as an example of courage in whistleblowing. Emily was summoned to testify 3 times in that first week. Each time, she appeared with her head held high, answering all questions with clarity and honesty. Brad's lawyers tried to intimidate her, insinuated she was involved in the crimes. But District Attorney Miller was always present, protecting her. In the 3rd hearing, the judge determined that Emily received full immunity in exchange for her cooperation. She was officially recognized as a victim, not an accomplice. When we left the courthouse that day, Emily cried with relief. "It is over," she said between sobs. "It is really over. Yes, my daughter, it is over." But it was not completely over. There were still practical matters to resolve. The Golden Spoon was permanently closed, its assets seized to pay debts to suppliers and employees. The North Star never officially opened. The space was secured by the Justice Department. Emily had to deal with the divorce, a process that District Attorney Miller said would be simple given the circumstances. Brad, from prison, did not even contest it. He had lost everything and had no energy for more legal battles. Sterling, on the other hand, hired the best lawyers money could buy. He fought every accusation, tried to use his political influence, threatened to sue everyone involved. But the evidence was too much. The documents, the testimonies, the bank records, everything pointed to a clear pattern of criminal activity. 2 months after the arrests, both were formally charged. Brad faced 8 to 12 years in prison. Sterling, with more charges including bribery of public officials, faced up to 15 years. It was during this period that something unexpected happened. I began receiving calls from people I hadn't spoken to in decades. Former colleagues, finance professionals, even some executives of companies that had discarded me years ago. Everyone wanted the same thing: my advice, my experience, my strategic mind. Apparently, the news that I had been the architect behind Brad and Sterling's downfall had spread in the right circles. And suddenly, I was interesting again. "Susan," said a CEO of a tech company when he called, "I heard you are available for consulting. I am facing some problems with an unfair competitor, and I need someone who thinks outside the box." "Consulting?" I repeated the word, testing how it sounded. "I do not know if I am ready to return officially." "Think about it. I can offer you a very lucrative contract and absolute discretion." I hung up thoughtfully. Emily, who was in the kitchen making tea, looked at me curiously. "Another offer? The 5th this week. It seems destroying 2 criminals was my best business card." Emily laughed, but then became serious. "Mom, you should consider it. Clearly you still have the talent, the passion. Why not go back? Because I am 62 years old and should be retired, relaxing, traveling. Or you could be doing what you love, using your gifts. She sat beside me. Mom, you saved me. Not just physically, but you showed me that it is possible to start over, that it is never too late to fight for oneself. Now I think it is time for you to apply that lesson in your own life. Her words stayed with me. That night, I called Michael. About that offer you made, I said. About a partnership? Is it still standing? It will always be. Did you decide? I decided. But I do not want a traditional partnership. I want to create something new. A consultancy specialized in identifying and exposing abusive corporate practices. I want to help other people like Emily, small businesses being crushed by unscrupulous giants. Michael was silent for a moment. That is brilliant. And I can provide the initial resources, the contacts. Susan, this can be huge. I do not want it to be huge. I want it to be effective. Better yet, let's schedule a meeting. We have a lot to discuss. In the following months, we set up the consultancy. Michael provided initial capital and office space. Stephen agreed to be our legal consultant. Sarah became our media partner, ready to expose cases when necessary. And Emily, my Emily, decided to join us after finishing a quick management course. I want to help, she said. I want my experience to mean something. We named the company Phoenix Strategy Group. The symbolism was obvious, helping people and companies rise from their ashes. Our first case was a woman named Julia, owner of a small bakery that was being forced into bankruptcy by a large chain using predatory practices. We investigated, documented, built a case. In 6 weeks, the chain was facing lawsuits, and Julia had her business back. The second case was a group of factory employees who had not received wages for months, while the owner bought luxury cars. We found his offshore accounts, traced the diverted money. In 2 months, he was in prison, and the employees received everything owed to them. With each case, our reputation grew. We started receiving more requests for help than we could handle. We hired more people, expanded operations, and always, we kept our principle. Protect the vulnerable, expose the abusers. Brad was tried first. Sitting in the courtroom, he looked like a shadow of the arrogant man he had been. He had lost weight. His hair was gray. When he looked at Emily, who was in the audience, there was no anger in his eyes, only defeat. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Tiffany, who had been his companion during the ascent, did not appear at the trial. She had fled to another state, trying to rebuild her life away from the scandal. Sterling's trial was longer, more complex. His lawyers tried every legal maneuver possible, but in the end, the evidence was undeniable. He was sentenced to 14 years. When the sentence was read, he looked for me in the audience. Our eyes met for the first time in 24 years. I saw recognition in his eyes, then understanding, and finally something that might be respect. He knew. He knew that I had orchestrated everything, that the woman he had fired and defamed years ago had returned and destroyed his empire, and there was nothing he could do about it. After the trial, I gave an interview to Sarah. It was my first public appearance, speaking about the whole case. Why did you do it? She asked. Why risk so much? Turn your whole life upside down? Because I saw my daughter being destroyed by a cruel man, I replied. And I realized that if I did nothing, I would be betraying everything that ever meant anything to me. I spent 24 years being invisible, being small, but when I saw Emily in that corner eating leftovers, something inside me woke up, and I decided I would never be invisible again. The interview was viewed by millions. I received hundreds of messages from women who had gone through similar situations, who were inspired by our story to report their own abusers. One of those messages was from a woman named Beatrice. She had worked for Sterling 10 years ago. She had been sexually harassed and fired when she rejected his advances. She had never reported it out of fear. But after seeing what you and Emily did, she wrote, I found courage. I am going to sue. I am going to make my voice heard. And she did. And she wasn't the only one. In the following months, an avalanche of complaints against Sterling emerged. Women he had harassed, employees he had exploited, business partners he had cheated. Each story added years to his sentence. A year after his initial arrest, Sterling was facing additional charges that could keep him in prison for another 20 years. His corporate empire had crumbled completely. His companies were sold, his assets seized. The man who was once one of the most powerful in the city was now just an inmate number. 2 years have passed since that fateful night when I entered the kitchen of the Golden Spoon and saw my daughter eating leftovers. 2 years since I made that call to Michael and set in motion the events that would change our lives forever. Emily was unrecognizable, in the best way possible. She had graduated in business administration with honors, was working with me at Phoenix Strategy Group, and had become a vocal advocate for victims of workplace abuse. She gave lectures at universities, wrote articles, appeared on TV shows discussing labor rights. The divorce had been finalized long ago. Emily recovered all her savings, plus compensation for moral damages. She used the money to buy a small condo and invest in her education, and she was happy, truly happy. I saw it in her smile, in the sparkle of her eyes, in the way she walked with her head held high. She had risen from the ashes, exactly like the phoenix that named our company. Phoenix Strategy Group was thriving. We had a team of 15 people now, including investigators, lawyers, communication specialists. We had resolved over 100 cases, helped hundreds of people, exposed dozens of fraudulent schemes. Michael was right. I had found my purpose again. Every morning I woke up excited to go to work, to use my mind in ways I hadn't used in decades. At 64, I was in the prime of my career, but it wasn't all work. Emily convinced me to take a vacation, to travel, to enjoy life. We went to Europe together, visited museums, ate at incredible restaurants, though always with a critical eye for the working conditions of the staff. "Mom," Emily told me one night while we were dining in Paris, "you saved my life. I know I say it a lot, but I need you to understand how true it is. If you hadn't shown up that day—" "Don't think about that," I interrupted her. "What matters is where you are now. I know, but sometimes I still have nightmares. I still see myself in that corner, hungry, humiliated, thinking there was no way out. But you found the way out. We found it together." She smiled. "Yes, we found it, and now we are helping other people find theirs." Back in Chicago, we received a case that touched us particularly deep. A young woman named Ashley had been hired as an intern at a large marketing firm. Her boss harassed her constantly, made inappropriate comments, touched her without consent. When she complained to HR, she was fired under false allegations of poor performance. Ashley was devastated, traumatized, afraid of never getting a job again. When she came to our office, I saw a lot of Emily in her. The shame, the fear, the feeling of powerlessness. "We are going to solve this," Emily told her with conviction. "We are going to make your boss pay for every second of suffering he caused you." And we did. We investigated, documented patterns of behavior. We discovered that Ashley wasn't the first. There were 5 other women before her who had suffered harassment from the same boss. All had been silenced with non-disclosure agreements and small settlements. We convinced all of them to break the agreements and testify together. Stephen argued that non-disclosure agreements do not apply to criminal cases, that sexual harassment is a crime that needs to be exposed. The case went to trial. The boss, confident in his position of power, did not believe he would be convicted. He underestimated the strength of 6 women testifying together. He underestimated the impact of the media coverage Sarah orchestrated. He underestimated the determination of our team. He was convicted, fired, and banned from working in leadership positions. The company paid substantial compensation to all 6 women, and Ashley, just like Emily, found her strength again. "Thank you," she said on the last day of the trial, hugging Emily and me. "You gave me back my voice." "You always had your voice," Emily replied. "We just helped you use it." It was cases like this that reminded me why we had done all that, why the fight had been worth it. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was the warden of the prison where Brad was serving his sentence. "Mrs. Susan? Brad Miller is asking to speak with his daughter." "Sorry, his ex-wife. He says he wants to apologize." I passed the information to Emily. She was silent for a long time. "Do you want to go?" I asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants to hear what he has to say. Another part never wants to see him in life again. There is no right answer. It is your decision. She thought for 3 days. Finally, she decided to go, and she asked me to accompany her. The prison was a cold and depressing place, exactly as you would imagine. Brad was brought to the visiting room in a faded orange uniform. He had aged years since the last time we saw him. His hair was completely gray. His face was thin and lined. When he saw Emily, his eyes filled with tears. "Emily," he began, his voice hoarse. I don't even know where to start." "Then don't start," said Emily coldly. "You asked to see me. I am here. Speak." Brad took a deep breath. "I want to apologize for what I did to you, for the way I treated you. It was unforgivable. I was so focused on building something great that I forgot I was destroying the person I should love and protect." "You didn't love me for a second," replied Emily. "I was a tool, a means to an end, and when I wasn't useful anymore, you discarded me like trash. I know, and I am going to spend the rest of my life with that on my conscience. I stay awake every night, thinking about what I did, how I humiliated you. If I could go back, but you can't," I interrupted her. "What is done is done. You destroyed years of Emily's life. You caused trauma she will carry forever. And you are apologizing now because you have time to reflect in prison, because finally you faced consequences. But where was that regret when you made her eat leftovers? When you laughed at her humiliation?" Brad lowered his head. "It wasn't there. I was a monster. I know that now." Emily remained silent, studying the man who was once her husband. "Do you want to know something, Brad? I forgive you." Both Brad and I looked at her surprised. "Not because you deserve it," she continued, "but because I deserve it. I deserve to let go of that rage, that hate. Carrying it only hurts me, so I forgive you. But that does not mean I forget. It does not mean what you did was acceptable. It just means I am no longer going to let you have power over my peace." She stood up. "Goodbye, Brad. I hope you use these years in prison to become a better person. But I won't be around to see it." We left the prison. In the car, Emily breathed deeply, processing. "How are you?" I asked. "Free," she replied, for the first time completely free. Months later, we received news of Sterling too. He had suffered a heart attack in prison. It wasn't fatal, but it left him weakened. His sentence was reviewed for medical reasons. He would be transferred to house arrest for the last years of his sentence. Part of me felt satisfaction with that. He had lost everything: his freedom, his health, his empire, his reputation. The other part just felt emptiness. Revenge, I discovered, is not as sweet as we imagine. What really mattered was what we built on top of the ruins of what they tried to destroy. Emily had a new life, a meaningful career, a voice that helped others. I had rediscovered my purpose, proved that it is never too late to start over. And together we were making a difference, one person at a time. Today, 3 years after that day in the restaurant, I am sitting in my office looking out at the city of Chicago through the window. Phoenix Strategy Group is on the 10th floor of a modern building, very different from my small house where it all began. The walls of the office are full of thank you letters from clients we helped, photos of the team, awards we won for our corporate social justice work. It is a long way from that invisible retiree I was. Emily enters my office, carrying a briefcase. At 35, she is now our director of operations. She wears elegant suits, her hair is always impeccable, and she walks with a confidence that is inspiring. "Mom, we need to discuss the Ferguson case. The situation is more complex than we thought." We spend the next hour reviewing details, planning strategies. It is our biggest case yet. A restaurant chain exploiting migrant workers, paying below minimum wage without proper registration. "This reminds me," says Emily thoughtfully, "where we started. Yes, but now we have the resources, the experience, the team to do something real about it." My cell phone rings. It is an unknown number. I answer. "Hello? Susan?" A young female voice. "My name is Jessica. I don't know if you can help me, but I saw your interview on TV, the story about your daughter, and I'm going through the same thing." My heart squeezes. "Tell me, Jessica." She tells about her abusive boss, about the degrading working conditions, about how she is losing herself day after day. It is a familiar story, painfully familiar. Jessica, I say when she finishes, you are not alone. We are going to help you. Can you come to our office tomorrow? Really? Are you really going to help me? Absolutely. That is what we exist for. When I hang up, Emily is looking at me with a smile. One more? One more. There is always one more, replies Emily. As long as there are people being exploited, abused, there will be work for us. She is right, of course. The work never ends. But that does not discourage me. On the contrary, it energizes me. Each new person we help is a victory, proof that what we do matters. That night, I have dinner with Emily and Michael at one of the nicest restaurants in the city. It is a place we investigated quietly before visiting. Fair treatment of employees, proper wages, dignified working conditions. We do not support businesses that do not respect those things. A toast, Michael raises his glass, to Phoenix Strategy Group. 3 years of operation, more than 200 cases resolved, hundreds of lives changed. And to many more years, adds Emily. And to second chances, I conclude. For all of us, we toast. The wine is excellent, the food is delicious, the company is perfect. I look at Emily, so beautiful, so strong, so far from that broken creature I rescued 3 years ago. I look at Michael, the man who gave me a second chance when I needed it most. And I think about myself. Susan, 64 years old, who spent decades in the shadows but emerged stronger than ever, who proved that it is never too late to fight, to start over, to make a difference. My phone vibrates. Another message from someone asking for help, another potential case, more work, and I smile, because this is exactly where I want to be. After dinner, Emily and I walk through the city. It is a cool night. The stars are visible despite the city lights. Mom, says Emily suddenly, do you regret anything? Everything that happened? All the choices you made? I think carefully before answering. I regret having lost so many years being invisible, but I do not regret having taken the blame for Michael, because that eventually led us here. I do not regret making Brad and Sterling pay, because they deserved it and because it saved you. And I definitely do not regret creating Phoenix, because it gave me back my life. I don't regret anything either, says Emily. Not even the time with Brad. Because that experience, as horrible as it was, taught me about strength. It taught me that I can survive anything. And it gave me a purpose to help others survive too. I hug my daughter as we walk. We are survivors, fighters, phoenixes that rose from the ashes. And we are just getting started. The next week, Jessica comes to our office. She is scared, fragile, but there is determination in her eyes. Emily sits with her, takes her hand, tells her own story. You are going to get through this, says Emily. I got through it, and I am going to be with you every step of the way. I begin to work on Jessica's case, putting together the strategy, gathering evidence. It is familiar now, this process. But each case is unique. Each person has their own story of suffering and courage. Months pass. Jessica's case goes to trial. Her boss is convicted. She receives compensation. She starts to rebuild her life. One more victory. And then comes the next case. And the next. The wheel keeps turning. Today, sitting in my office, I look at the plaque on the wall. Phoenix Strategy Group, where ashes turn into fire. It is our promise. Our commitment. My phone rings. Another person needing help. I answer with a smile. Hello, Phoenix Strategy Group. How can I help you? And so it continues. Day after day. Case after case. Life after life. We help people find their voices. To fight for justice. To be reborn. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves dignity. And everyone deserves to fight against those who try to destroy them. I learned that the hard way. But now, I use that lesson to help others. And there is nothing more rewarding. Emily enters my office later that day. Jessica just called. She got a new job at a good company. She is excited, happy. Another success story. Another one, agrees Emily. Mom, did you ever think about writing a book? Our story, the cases we solved. It could help more people. Maybe, I consider. When we have time. You never have time, laughs Emily. But it is for a good cause. You are right. My calendar is always full. There is always more work to do. But I would not change a thing. This is my life now, my purpose. At night, alone at home, I look at an old photo of Emily when she was a child. So innocent, so full of dreams. She went through so much, suffered so much. But she survived. More than that, she thrived. And so did I. Against all odds, we both found our way back to the light. I receive an email from Ashley, the young woman we helped with the harassment case. She is in law school now. She wants to be a labor lawyer, to help others as she was helped. Another phoenix rising, that is why we do what we do. Not just for immediate justice, but for the domino effect. Each person we help can help others. Each voice we liberate can liberate more voices. Before sleeping, I do something I hadn't done in a long time. I open that old file, the documents of my case from 24 years ago, when I took the blame for Michael, when I lost everything. For years, looking at those papers brought me pain. They reminded me of what I lost, what could have been. But now, I see something different. I see the beginning of a journey. I see the first step on a path that would eventually lead me here. If I hadn't made that choice, Michael wouldn't have become who he is. He couldn't have helped me when Emily needed it. We wouldn't have created Phoenix Strategy Group. Hundreds of people wouldn't have received help. Everything is connected. Every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of pain led to something greater. I close the file and put it away. I don't need it anymore. Those memories no longer define me. What defines me now is what I built on those ruins. I turn off the light and sleep in peace, knowing that tomorrow there will be more work, more cases, more people needing help, and I will be ready. Because I am Susan. I am 64 years old, and I am just getting started. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe. And tell me in the comments, which part left you with your mouth open? Oh, and don't forget to become a member to have access to exclusive videos that I do not upload here. I'll see you there.